It's been so long. Hopefully we'll see everybody else.
I hope so too.
Yeah, I heard from Michael LePage that he's not going to be able to join us. But that's the only one that I heard anything from, so.
There's Scott. Hi, Scott. Happy New Year.
Hey, Carrie. Yeah, Happy New Year. Long time no see, everybody.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Exactly. Glad to be back. Working on climate change.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
What about Lynette?
Didn't hear anything from Lynette.
Well, our first presenter's here. Hi, Michael.
All right, cool.
Hi, how you doing?
Great.
Oh, where is everybody?
I don't know.
I think everyone forgot about us.
Oh, I hope not. Not after all this work. A lot of work.
Oh, there's our other presenter.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Camilla, how's it going?
Good. How are you all doing?
Good.
John's online here. That's great. Hi, John. Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Hi, John.
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Good. I just sent you a text message so you can ignore it.
Okay.
Okay, so
It
we're
was a
just
nice
missing
one.
two. Do we want to get started? And hopefully Lynette will.
Did you
join
send
us?
one to Lynette, Jeff, or should I?
Yeah,
Well, let's get started and call the meeting to order.
Lynette says she's trying to get in, so I don't know
Okay.
what the.
All right. Wait a second here.
Does she need the information? Again, I can email it to her.
Why don't you send it to her on? Why don't you just go ahead and send it to her, Anya, while I'm texting her?
Yep, I'm gonna do that.
Just trying to get some technical difficulties straightened out here, and then we'll get started. Hi, Jay.
Hi. Oh, am I live?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I'm not muted.
No. So welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
All right. So
I would say, Carrie, just go ahead and I'll work it out with Lynette.
thank you. Okay, so we're gonna call the Climate Committee to order on Thursday, January 20th. And Jeff Barron and myself are co-chairs, and we're present along with Scott Lonergan and John Hill, which are our committee members. So we're waiting for Lynette here. Let's go to public appearances. Is there anybody in the public that would like to make any comments about things not on the agenda? If so, if you could speak up now, that would be terrific, or raise your hand. I'm also looking for raised hands. I don't see anybody. I know it's been a while since we've met, but we have a lot to go over today. A lot of people have been working hard on reports and data, and
There is a raised hand, Carrie.
Oh, there is. Kira, Rambanga.
Yep, that's me.
Okay. Oh, hi.
Hello.
Would you like to make a comment publicly?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, please. So good afternoon to you all. My name is Kiera, and I am here on behalf of Landwatch Monterey County. I work there as a climate action intern. Before I begin, I want to commend you all on going through and reworking the transportation estimates. Thank you, and that really helps my research, which is what I'm going to talk about right now. I am researching climate action plans in California cities and counties. I had the opportunity to look at climate action plans over 10 cities, including yours. Your climate action and adaptation plan is comprehensive and covers a lot of sectors, which is great. But however, it's missing some key elements I feel that need to be addressed. Specifically, you need to focus to expand its plan and focus on 3 important areas: transportation, natural gas, and land use. For transportation, the city needs to favor electric vehicle usage over fossil fuel vehicles by streamlining the EV permitting process per the guidance from the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. The city also needs to eliminate natural gas in new buildings, and for existing buildings, develop an electrification plan that would slowly phase out natural gas. Finally, in terms of land use / housing, should increase allowable heights and densities. Other cities and counties have adopted these strategies I just discussed and have seen real results. For example, Santa Cruz had a goal of reducing single occupancy vehicle commutes by 10% by 2020, and I'm happy to say they have achieved 50% of that target, with single occupancy vehicle commutes being reduced by 5%. The city of San Mateo made electric vehicles charging stations more available and saw an increase in tourism as well, leading to more local jobs and small businesses increasing their revenue from the increased tourism. The city of Mill Valley also successfully achieved its 2020 emissions reduction targets, 20% below year 2000 levels by 2020. So as you can see, these strategies really do work, and without actions to address transportation, the phasing out of natural gas, and the creation of affordable climate-friendly housing through these in densities and heights, Carmel will not see their greenhouse gas emissions reduce significantly, which is, I don't want to see happen to this lovely city.
So thank you for that. We are actually going to be talking about some of those things today. So I think you were a little ahead of schedule here. And I gave you a little license to do that. Because we usually don't get much public comment. But if you could, especially with items 1 and 2, I think they're relevant to what you're saying. So please feel free to comment as we move along. All right. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to talk? I don't see any other hands.
Oh, and I'm also getting a message that there's some background noise. So anybody who's not currently speaking, if they could mute themselves, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, it looks like most people are muted, except for you and I, except for me right now. Okay, so let's go on to our first order of business. Oh, excuse me, do we have any announcements from the committee members? I don't have any announcements. So let's go on to the first order of business, which is to review the Carmel-by-the-Sea greenhouse gas inventory update, forecasts and reduction targets, technical memorandum. And that we're going to have a presentation from Michael Hendricks, correct?
Correct.
So if I can share my screen, I have a brief PowerPoint. A lot to go over, particularly on origin destination modeling and how we amended the VMTs. So
Yeah, I think I've given you should be able to share your screen, right?
yes. All right. And can you see the presentation?
Yes.
All right. So I'll get on with it. I want to go as quick as I can. To give you a little recap, the last time we were together, there were concerns on the on-road transportation that AMBAG provided. In particular, AMBAG used boundary method of developing VMT rather than an origin destination model. AMBAG is in the process of transitioning their regional model into an origin destination model, but it would not be at a granular enough level to really benefit the city of Carmel. So what we proposed as an interim solution was to estimate the different trip types within the AMBAG VMT for commuter trips, visitor trips, determine origin destination, and apply a fair share portion of the VMT to the city. And by fair share portion, I mean following the protocols where there is an origin or destination outside the city, though the jurisdiction with each of those points of the trip share that total VMT. And that is because those land uses within those jurisdictions are the opportunity to impact that trip, to change it in some way, either reducing the VMT or eliminating the trip entirely. So pass-through trips, which Carmel does not have a lot of, don't count at all, but trips that have origin and destination is where we're focused. And of course, those trips that are entirely within the city, small local trips, count 100% of the VMT. So to give you kind of an idea of what an origin destination traffic modeling would do, it uses land use types to develop traffic analysis zones used as nodes within the model. Those nodes become origins and destinations for trips. So as an example, a residential neighborhood would be one traffic analysis zone that would become a node within an origin destination model. And then say a university or a shopping district or area of industrial or office complexes would become different TAZs, traffic analysis zones within that model, and become origins and destinations of those trips. And the idea here is, in the past, especially regional traffic models have developed traffic analysis zones strictly off of population, kind of like you would with a zip code or other areas, irregardless of the land uses within those traffic analysis zones. This is trying to gather information and be more precise on the vehicle miles traveled from logical origins and destinations based on land uses. So one of the limits to any traffic model, and that includes an origin destination model, is that that traffic model is limited to the model limits. So here's a good graphic that shows all of those nodes that are going in and out of this particular county, and it's from there the VMT is not calculated anymore. So those are the farthest reaches of the model. And I believe my task was to figure out the full portion of VMT allocated to the city. And I have to say here, the city is unique in that it is a tourist-based economy. Because of that, it is actually attracting visitors from around the world. And in doing our research, I'll move on, we used several sources of information: the Carmel Chamber of Commerce, Monterey County Visitors Bureau, the Carmel Visitors Center, and the Visit Carmel website to gather information on where visitors are coming from and how they're getting to Carmel. So for tourism-based trips, this is what we've determined based off of the information we got. Domestic visitors make up roughly 90% of the visitors coming to Carmel, and the vast majority of those, 42%, come from the San Francisco Bay Area. Salinas is the second highest at 40%. And the trips coming from Salinas are day trips, if you will. People come to shop or enjoy the beach, and they return to Salinas that night. Los Angeles, Orange counties at 9%, Sacramento, Yolo counties at 5%, Fresno's at 2%, and New York, New Jersey's at 2%. And if you'll notice, the international visitors, which make up roughly 10% of the visitors to Carmel, China is the dominant origin of those visitors at 38%, and you see the list there. For the international visitors, 98% of them flew into SFO, San Francisco International Airport, and either took buses or passenger vehicles to get into Carmel. There is a robust tour bus business that comes out of San Francisco and hits the Monterey Bay Area, and that includes Carmel as well. And for those folks coming from New York, New Jersey, they also fly in predominantly to San Francisco and commute to Carmel either by bus or passenger car. There's a small fraction, less than 1%, that fly into the Monterey airport and go from there to Carmel. Other types of trips that we estimated were trips associated with second homes. These are vacation homes. A lot of these are short-term rentals, as well as second homes for people that occasionally come to Carmel. And we were able to get some very generalized information through several Carmel real estate brokers. Commuter trips, we discussed with AMBAG, and then deliveries and local trips. So these make up the different trip types. And this is important for two reasons. One, it really helps us in understanding origins, destinations, knowing the different trip types, visitors versus those associated with second homes, commuters, deliveries, and local trips. The other reason is it helps us customize the on-road transportation reduction measures to fit the type of trips, so that we're really targeting those trips and hopefully reducing them or reducing the VMT associated with them. So one other thing I wanted to say is that it breaks down, if you look at it by trip type, the dominant trip type is commuter trips, followed by visitors at 30% and second homes at 20%. You notice 10% is deliveries and 2% is local trips. Local trips I would describe as those going from home to shopping, or taking the kids to school, or the dry cleaners, that kind of thing. But the percentages change when you look at VMT, and that is because of the amount of miles traveled by visitors and those using second homes. So you can see the shift where if you look at VMT as a percentage, the dominant or largest portion is visitor trips, followed by second homes, and commute trips become the third because of the amount of miles per trip that are traveled. That's a kind of an important distinction because it will have an impact on the emissions. So one of the things we wanted to do, I'll go back to this for just a second. On visitor trips, the dominant place where we got the origin of most of those trips was San Francisco. That is, I don't have that mileage right off the top of my head, but it was roughly 110 miles, I believe. Whereas second homes was similar in the amount of mileage. Commute trips were like 26 miles on average. So one of the things we wanted to do, I know that you were interested in really dealing with the full scope of where these vehicles were coming from. And so what we have recommended is providing those VMTs that are out of the regional model, that come out of, that go beyond Monterey County as scope 3 emissions. And let me describe that for a second. Scope 1 emissions are direct and are required by the protocol to be within a climate action plan. Direct emissions would be the vehicles that are traveling within the city limits and even within the county of Monterey, because of the tailpipe emissions are coming directly from the streets of the city. Scope 2 indirect is primarily electricity for the city, because while the consumption of electricity is occurring in the city, the actual generation of that electricity is somewhere else. So that's considered indirect. Scope 3 is voluntary indirect. These are emission sources that are not required of the protocols, but a jurisdiction may elect to do them for particular reasons. And in your case, really wanting to take responsibility in a reasonable fashion for all of the trips associated with Carmel. So my recommendation here is that all of those VMTs within the Monterey County regional model are considered scope 1 direct emissions, and those that get outside the model, such as those coming from San Francisco to the county line, and from Los Angeles to the county line, and such, as scope 3 emissions. Now pause a minute there, because I know this is getting kind of technical in the protocols. Are there any questions or confusion about that? Hearing, go ahead.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So first, before I ask my question, Michael, let me just say I think this is just great work, and I'm very appreciative of your taking the time. It looks like you've done a lot of research in putting all this together, and I can't wait to follow up on this in future years. So thank you very much. In the staff report, I think you talked about a little bit about international travel, and I know that. Could you describe the tourist VMTs that are not part of scope 3? Like, I think you talked about international flights and stuff like that. Is there anything other than that? Is that like scope 4? Is there anything else that's sort of not in this work?
So scope 3 is as far as you go. We did not calculate air miles traveled. So traveling from China to SFO or from Canada to SFO, we did not calculate, but that could be done. And when we get into the reduction measures, I'm going to give you some ideas of how that can be done. Unfortunately, the scope of my work kind of ended there. As you pointed out, I had a lot of research and I really wanted to nail down the VMT, but I know you're interested in the air miles as well. So I'm going to give you some good ideas on how that gets done within the CAP here later on when we talk about follow-up.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Michael, it's Lynette. I had a question. In our last discussion, we talked about the day workers in and out of Carmel, and I'm assuming that that is captured under commuter miles. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and can you tell me if what you found was most of that commuter type travel Salinas or Monterey, or where was that coming from, or were you able to determine that?
So Salinas was the primary generator of both commuter trips and delivery trips, but there were commuter trips from all across the county in much smaller numbers than Salinas.
I thought that might be the case because the high percentage, I think it was 40% of travelers from Salinas. It seemed like that would be a lot of that anyway, would be the day workers and deliveries.
Yes, but don't confuse the day visitors, which are people going to the beach or going shopping and just visiting for the day. They're tourists in a sense, although they're local.
Ah, okay. So commute trips, that whole segment is separate from visitor.
Yes.
And there's no intertwining of the two. Thank you for clearing that up for me because I didn't see that. Thank you. My second question is about the tour buses. And I don't know how you acknowledge their coming here, how many of them there are, how that gets split between from San Francisco to the county line and then from the county line to us or within the city limits, so that there's no either double counting or missed counting of those tour buses.
So the tour buses are a significant portion of those trips coming from San Francisco. We estimated the number of bus trips from information we got from some of the tour companies as to where their tour buses were going. Those tour buses, we allocated half of the VMT to San Francisco, their origin, and half to the city of Carmel. I've got some fairly unique recommended reduction measures to help manage tour buses, because you don't want to stifle tourism. You don't want to stop the tour bus, but we certainly want to reduce the emissions associated with them. So
thank you.
Towards the end of the presentation, I'll give you some ideas on how to do that.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Michael,
Yes.
This is Carrie. I agree that the visitor percentage from Salinas is a great percentage. I think we definitely saw that as an example during the COVID times where, you know, the hotels were not busy, but certainly our beaches were busy with those short-term visitors. I'm not sure, how did you get at the employees coming from Salinas? My experience with my employees, I have about 20 employees. I don't have one employee that commutes from Salinas. It's either Seaside, Marina, and Monterey. So how did you come up with that?
We work with AMBAG, and Salinas does provide a fair number of workers, but you're right. The places you just mentioned also are centers for commute trips. So they come from all across the county. Salinas has probably got the largest pocket, but that doesn't mean that that's anywhere near, not even the majority of the commute trips.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Sure. So I'm moving
Michael,
on now.
I'm sorry, but it's Lynette again. I just have one little follow-up question on that. How is it possible to get a handle on the workers who just travel in to Carmel for day work and leave? I know the employers like Carrie are able to find and have great information for you and others. But all of the construction workers, all of the people who provide housekeeping services in individual homes and all of that, is there a way to get a handle on that? It just seems very elusive to me.
So at a very generalized level, AMBAG does have some information on that, but one of the recommendations I'm going to have at the end of this PowerPoint presentation, you guys are kind of jumping ahead to my conclusions, is that we do a commute survey of all the businesses within Carmel to get a better sense of where everybody is coming from and how long they work in Carmel, whether they stay in Carmel overnight or are they just day workers. How many of them are construction work? Those kinds of questions could be in a commute survey that could get you a lot more granularity into the different types of commute trips.
So it sounds like, Michael, we should allow you to continue with the presentation.
Yes, thank you. I just paused here for a minute just in case things got too technical with scope 1, 2, and 3. But I can tell you guys are with it. You are already jumping to a lot of the recommended next steps. So moving on. So looking at the allocation of VMT between scope 1 and scope 3 emissions, the majority of the emissions, 52%, are scope 3. 48% are scope 1. So that's an interesting dilemma because of those long miles between San Francisco and Carmel, Los Angeles and Carmel, Fresno and Carmel, and the other locations, just how much of it is scope 3. So that is a big chunk, and that really gives us information on where we need to focus reductions when we're looking at on-road transportation, particular to the city of Carmel. This is unusual for a typical jurisdiction. I would say typically a city like Gonzales or some of the other cities, their trips would all land within that regional model. Yours, the majority of them are not, just because of tourism. So moving forward, I have here the revised inventory compared to the AMBAG's original inventory for 2019. And these are just scope 1 and 2 emissions. So our revised inventory, the largest sector is now transportation at 45.8%. This is only scope 1 on-road transportation. And that fits really nicely within a typical inventory for a jurisdiction. If you'll notice, AMBAG had you at 25.9%, which was suspiciously low. And for those reasons, I think it behooved us to get a handle on the VMT and make sure that we allocated the full amount and not just rely on AMBAG's regional model to calculate it. And one thing I want to say here, AMBAG did not do anything wrong. Regional transportation modeling has a lot of different purposes, and they are trying to provide you an added service of also doing GHG inventories, which is fantastic, by the way. Not every MPO does that, but having that information is great. But their modeling requires them to do transportation planning and those kinds of things. So they have structured their model differently than what you would ideally want for developing VMT in a climate action plan. It's not that they did anything wrong, it's just that we're doing it a little differently to really hone in on the different types of trips and how we can reduce those vehicle miles traveled. So what we did is we made an assumption that 2018 and 2015 inventories similarly undercounted VMT. And we did the same exercise for 2019 that we did for 2018 and 2015 to give you this revised trend analysis. 2005 and 2010 are the original inventories from AMBAG that have not been touched. But something I got to note is when you look at the trend, they are much more consistent than they were before. If you remember, between 2010 and 2015, there was this large drop, huge drop in transportation-related emissions. You don't see that anymore. Actually, it looks fairly consistent, inventory year to inventory year. The 2019, those inventories for 2015, 2018, and 2019, the total emissions have increased significantly because of the added VMT. So the other place, I think the last presentation I did, you really wanted a breakdown of the energy sector, particularly electricity and where the different sources of electricity are. So on the energy sector, natural gas is the dominant amount of emissions. It represents over 90% of total energy emissions. Electricity, because you're using 3CE, is very lean on emissions. And you notice it's less than 1% of the total energy sector emissions. I broke down the generation for 3CE. The dominant generation source is large hydroelectric at 56%, and then solar at 15%. The third highest is 13%. That's purchased electricity. So that portion of the electricity is the portion that still has some potential emissions in it. And let me explain that a little bit. When utilities provide you electricity, or a provider such as 3CE, they need to have electricity to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there comes time while they're trying to make it as renewable as possible where they just need electricity and they have to buy it on the spot market. That is where that 13% comes from. We don't know where all the purchases came from. A lot of it probably PG&E. It could have come from Arizona. If so, there's obviously from PG&E, there would be a bit of natural gas generation there, particularly on the spot market when you're buying it, when peak loads might be going on. So that portion of it right there, I know 3CE is concerned, and they are looking at ways of reducing that considerably. The other sources which get more minor, 9% is geothermal, 3% is small hydroelectric, and then 2% is wind and biomass. Biomass has some emissions associated with it, as does geothermal, but the rest of the renewables in that mix are emission-free. So this is a trend analysis, and you'll, or the forecast, I should say. The red line is BAU, and you notice it's a very slight downward trend. The population and housing and jobs are growing very modestly. So modestly that as turnover in appliances and turnover of the vehicle fleet occur, even at today's standards, the emissions as a whole go down. I think you have a projected growth between 2020 and 2030 of 5 housing units and 5 people. So that's not much growth. Jobs are a little better. It's like, I think 100 jobs, but still really modest growth. And when you compare that with just as people are buying newer appliances, newer vehicles, those kinds of things, and the better efficiencies of it, the emission trend is just ever so slightly down. The green area is what we call ABAU. That's the state reductions associated with the low carbon fuel standard, the requirement for transit authorities to transition their buses to electric, those kinds of things. And you can see a steeper curve downward between 2020 and 2030, and then it levels off a little bit. That's because they have not generated a scoping plan to get you all the way to 2045. So that gap between the reduction targets and the green area is where our local reductions are going to focus. And you notice 2030 is really where I want to focus this current cap. It's not that we're not mindful of 2045, but the city really needs to go in step, I would say, with the state in order to achieve a zero emissions goal by 2045. So we do the things that set the city up, such as electrifying existing land uses, requiring new residential to have no natural gas. Those kinds of things set us up for the 2045 goal, as well as renewables and going to 100% renewables. We do that in 2030, and then somewhere, probably in the next 3 to 5 years, you'll want to update this cap with new inventories, and then an evaluation of the reduction measures, what local reduction measures worked, which ones didn't, and make changes in the climate action plan accordingly to go the next steps. So with that, I have the conclusions that I've made here. The analysis provides a solid baseline to develop strategic actions associated with the reduction of on-road transportation emissions. I'm going to get to that right in the next slide. The analysis provides the technical information needed to develop a climate action plan. The only thing left we have now is to quantify the reduction measures after we do some final refinements of them. And the analysis provides a sound methodology to use in updating the inventories in the future, particularly to VMT. So some of the recommended next steps, one of the things we want to do now that we have a better handle on visitor trips and second homes is provide a tourism-based reduction measure actions in the forthcoming cap for those VMTs. One is to incentivize electric vehicles and electric buses for visitors. And we can talk a little more about that, but providing priority parking for electric vehicles at the hotels, and for buses that are electric, providing them with priority parking close to, and then those diesel buses or natural gas buses, you can have them in a less convenient area to park. And that kind of provides you some definite incentives for visitors to go electric. And then providing an option of carbon offsets and promoting them with the visitors. And carbon offsets could be used both for visitors that are driving in or taking that diesel bus in, or also for air travel. And it is here, I think, Jeff, that we will be able to get some estimates of when they do carbon offsets for a trip from China, they actually allocate, they calculate that out and allocate that. I want to talk a little bit about carbon offsets. They're kind of all over the map, and I would recommend using a broker that is acquainted with the CARB approved protocols for the voluntary markets. I can give you some names on those if you will. That way we have some decent, some what I'd call real carbon offsets that are associated within the US and have more assurance and of controls and verification of the emissions being reduced. And then the final one I had as far as really honing in on the tourist portion of the on-road transportation is develop a green visitor program. And what I mean by that is set up something, and you guys being business owners can probably brainstorm this a little bit, where if they come in an electric vehicle or an electric bus, and if they've offset their air travel with carbon offsets, they're given a designation as a green visitor, a Carmel green visitor, and maybe there's some perks there. You're recognized in shops. Maybe you get a free sample at a candy store or something like that to incentivize that. Another next step that we would like to talk about, and this is more longer term within the next 2 or 3 years, is provide an origin destination model that uses AMBAG's regional model as a baseline, but is focused on Carmel, so you can get a better handle of the VMT, at least within the model, and then develop a commute survey, just like I talked about earlier, and then update the visitor analysis, just like I did, to see if there's any trends in visits to Carmel and how that fits. So having said all that, are there any other questions?
Michael, Lynette again. Can you explain the carbon offset procedure? I have an understanding, very basic understanding of it, but in terms of international travel, I just can't envision how that might work.
So for international travel, we would use a carbon calculator to estimate the amount of emissions associated with air travel, say between China and San Francisco International Airport. Right. And that would be a clump of, you know, let's say 1,500 metric tons of CO2 equivalents. That's just a number off the top of my head. What we would do is we'd allocate 1,500 carbon offsets. Each carbon offset is 1 metric ton. Mm-hmm. And those carbon offsets are from mitigation projects. And we're limiting them to within the United States. We can't limit them to within California because California is so progressive on reducing emissions that all of the things that a carbon offset mitigation project would do are already required for most industries in California. So as an example, I'm working with a particular carbon broker to offset emissions from the University of California. And they've bought into a mitigation project that collects methane at landfills in North Carolina. North Carolina, if it was not for that mitigation project, would let those methane emissions just come up out of the air as fugitive emissions. So we're collecting that methane, refining it down to natural gas standards and injecting it into the natural gas pipeline there. And by doing that, the University of California gets the credits for that because they paid into that project. The other thing about these carbon credits is they are emission reductions that have already been done. So as example, that carbon capture, that methane capture, refinement, and injection into the pipeline had already been done before the University of California could count them as credits. Mm-hmm. What I like about that particular sector of carbon credits and the way that they're done is that it's introducing the kinds of things that we're already doing in California to places that this would not normally be done.
Right.
And it is reducing emissions within the United States. And maybe I'm a bit optimistic, but I'm thinking that places like North Carolina and Mississippi and Texas that might be really against doing anything about climate change would actually, because of the business and the economy of carbon credits, want to do these things. So we are, how can I put this? Planting seeds in places that would not normally grow GHG reductions.
Right.
Bad enough. So,
Michael, I have a related question.
Yeah.
As an example, when someone comes over from China, you've got 1,500 credits that you're allocating, but more than often, my guess would be that person is also going to Muir Woods and Sausalito and other locations. How do you account for that?
So that, I'm guessing, would be through a tour program, probably a bus tour. If they're an electric bus, that's great. If they're in a diesel bus, we'd want to capture the VMTs associated with that. One thing I want to try and keep our focus on is those things allocated to Carmel. I don't want things to get fussy like that total bus trip goes from Carmel to other places. Hopefully those other places will do something similar to Carmel, but we really do want to focus on those emissions that we can actually reduce and that we have some kind of direct, indirect control over or able to incentivize in a way that gets reduced. Does that make sense? So I'm not after that visitor from China just getting every single carbon footprint off of his path, but I certainly do want to get every single carbon footprint that goes to Carmel off that path.
Michael, this is Carrie.
Yes.
So a lot of the the international visitors, especially from Europe, they love renting a car and coming from San Francisco to Carmel and down to LA on the Coast Highway. We have some tour bus traffic, but it's mainly for a day trip. So they come, they stop in Monterey or Carmel for a few hours, and then they move on. Part of our challenge here is we don't have a lot of places to put a tour bus for them to park overnight. So we don't get a lot of tour bus traffic. It is mainly people driving. So incentivizing electric cars, I think, is definitely a way we want to go.
Yes.
So I'd like to go back to that graph that had the striped red, the green, the city of Carmel, 2015 to 2045. Yeah. So you have, so there's no blue there right now. Is the blue input, will the blue be input into that graph once we decide on our adaptation strategies?
The reduction measure strategies.
Reduction measure. Yes, sorry.
And we've talked a lot about those in the previous meetings, so we have a good list of them. Mm-hmm. I'm refining them now, particular to the on-road transportation, to really hone in on the VMT associated with visitors and second homes. Mm-hmm. But that my goal here, we're going to quantify those reduction measures. And my goal here is to fill in that red hatched area between 2019 and 2030 with blue.
Okay.
And it'll extend out to 2045. You'll see some red hatched between 2030 and 2045 because we're just not going to get to zero this soon. But at least get us to reduction measure quantification and strategies that assure us that we get to the 2030 target right now.
Okay. All right. So that's to come, as they say.
Yes. So that technical memo that you probably saw, and this is the last thing that was in it, will continue on with the reduction strategies. It'll talk about how they were developed and organized. And then you'll see at the very end another graph like this that, like I say, should have, my goal is to have those local reduction measures fill in that red hatched area between 2019 and 2020 and 2030 at this point.
Great. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have any comments or questions for Michael? This was great. Really nice presentation. Every time you present, we're learning more and more. And I think the whole idea of a lot of deliveries coming from Salinas, that's kind of where our vegetables come from. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's really important. So capturing that as trying to get at the whole VMT issue is really good.
I have one more comment, Michael. Sorry, but I don't want to beat this dead horse, but the construction worker and other day worker issue seems to me to be quite elusive. I'll use the example of, of a home reconstruction. If you walk up and down our streets, as all of us who live here do, you see these pods of trucks in front of any house that is being reconstructed or constructed, whatever is going on, or is being re-landscaped or is having hardscaping done. And it almost always seems that each worker has a vehicle that they are coming in. And there may be some ride sharing, but for the most part, you'll see 4 or 5 trucks if there are 4 or 5 people working on a project. And a commute survey that is intended to capture some of that, I don't think it's ever going to reach those people because they're not working for an entity like Carrie's Hotel or John's Restaurant. So I don't know how to find information on those because there is just so much of it. And the same thing with people who are in domestic work in town.
So the way you reach the construction day workers is through the construction companies that are getting these contracts, the general contractor and the subcontractors, and sending the commute surveys to them. I am not so worried about 100% participation in the commute survey. What I would suggest is, just as we're incentivizing electric vehicles for visitors, electric vehicles for those day workers is great. And I'll explain why. And right now, Ford is putting out their equivalent of a F-150 pickup truck that's all electric.
Yep.
The advantage to a construction worker in having that truck as opposed to a gas truck is rather than have a generator and be burning even more gas, is that they can actually plug into their truck. They actually have receptacles. They can do that. So they can do all of their work from that truck. So I think it'd be a pretty easy transition for them to go to electric. It'll actually save them money, which is why I'm pretty optimistic about that kind of tailored incentive program. You can't, I guess you could have an ordinance that requires them to have electric trucks. If you do something like that, I would suggest transitioning it, not like.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's very helpful to me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have any other questions or so Michael, help me out with next steps again.
So my contract, we are going to have that same technical memo. We're going to add in the calculation of reduction measures. We're fine-tuning the on-road transportation. And I just took a note about construction day workers and how we might have a reduction measure tailored to them as well as commuters, just trying to transition as many of the vehicles that must come to Carmel to electric as possible. And then of course, where there's opportunity to do ride sharing or in the local trips, we talked about Carmel's unique character and that it kind of fits a European style city. So more walking, more bicycling. If you have to have a vehicle for those local trips, make it a neighborhood electric vehicle as opposed to a regular vehicle. And if you, for some reason, have to have a regular vehicle, make it an electric vehicle. Those kinds of tailored reduction measures. So we're going to quantify that, fill that red in between 2020 and 2030 with blue, and provide you, do another presentation with that information.
And when do we expect to have that?
I'm going to talk to Agnes, but I'm hoping next meeting. That's a month away, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
A month away.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So at the earliest next month, at the latest a month following. How about that?
So February or March. Okay,
Yes,
excellent. All right, thank you so much.
you're welcome.
And so if you could unshare, because I think we're going to go on to the next topic.
Hey, I
Terry?
have a quick question for staff. The presentation was really great, Michael. Could you share that with us? Could you share that with Agnes? Is it on the website?
Yes, I have posted it on the webpage, on the Climate Committee webpage.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, because some of those graphs is really important. So thank you. All right, hold on. I'm getting to my agenda. All right, I don't see anybody else's hands up. So let's move on to the second item, which is review the revised list of adaptation strategies for Carmel. And Camilla, are you presenting?
Yes, I'm here and presenting. So let me just share my screen. Can y'all see that screen there?
Yes.
Great. So hi, everyone. Again, it's so nice to be here. I'm Camila Bobroff, a sustainability planner with Rincon Consultants, for those of you I haven't met yet. And over the last 6 months, we've been working on developing an adaptation strategy for Carmel. The purpose of today's presentation is to discuss progress to date on the adaptation strategy. Oh, can you still see my slides?
No, it's black right now.
It's black now.
Oh, I'm having some major computer issues today.
Camilla, if you want, I can share my screen and have the slides and just tell me when you want me to.
That would be great. I'm so sorry about this.
No worries.
Don't worry. Believe me.
Back.
Oh, you're back now. So
Maybe I'll keep going. And if it happens again, maybe Agnes, you can pull it up in the meantime, just in case.
Yep, I have it on my computer, so we're good to go either way.
Thanks. So I'll be discussing progress to date on the adaptation strategy, summarizing changes made to the strategy based on comments that we received during the public workshop in November. And we'll also discuss next steps and schedule. Of course, there'll be time for questions and discussion at the end, as always. Okay, so there were a variety of comments received at the public workshop. There was a desire for a more specific evacuation plan for senior residents. There's also a comment indicating that city planning guidelines and development standards should be updated citywide and not just in fire hazard zones. We saw a lot of comments suggesting increased participation and engagement efforts and some really great suggestions for how to reach more folks in the community. And there's an identified need for a grant writer to help implement the adaptation strategy and a desire for more specific actions. We also saw a lot of general support for policies and actions that are already in place. It seemed like most of the support were for policies on evacuation, policies focused on vulnerable communities, and there was support for the FireWise community certification. So in the following slides, I'll just speak a little bit to how we've addressed these types of comments in the updated adaptation strategy. So to address the comment related to developing a clear evacuation plan for senior residents, we revised action 1.1.1. The action now reads, maintain and update an evacuation plan every 8 years at minimum to account for all types of emergencies. The plan should focus on the most vulnerable groups, including the elderly community. Like I mentioned, it was suggested that city planning guidelines and development standards be updated citywide rather than only in the very high fire hazard severity zone. So to address this comment, reference to the very high fire hazard severity zone was removed from actions 1.1.8 and 1.1.9. So these policies now apply citywide. New potential outreach partnerships and ideas for new outreach methods were suggested. Some examples of actions that were revised include Action 1.1.3 and 1.2.3. Action 1.1.3 now reads, collaborate with Monterey Fire on its inspection and outreach efforts to reduce fire risk. Continue to coordinate with the CERT program and reach out to new potential outreach partners such as local businesses, community groups, and utilities to help distribute information to increase resident and homeowner awareness. One particularly creative suggestion was to use a wine and dine approach, which I thought was really great. And that was the motivation for including local businesses in this action. Action 1.2.3 is to ensure the community knows about the Resilience Hub and how to access it by sharing updates across city and community channels. And we added to partner with the CERT program and block captains and community groups to prioritize disadvantaged and marginalized communities, including senior residents and individuals with disabilities. Action 1.1.4 was added to ensure implementation of the city's adaptation strategy by hiring a grant writer. And like I mentioned, we received one comment about making the actions more specific. I know this has come up before, so I wanted to kind of touch on this and make a note that during this adaptation strategy refinement process, the actions have been developed to be as specific as possible while still leaving room to refine based on new information received in the implementation process. Things can change in the next 1 to 2 years of, what's technology is available or what different techniques are available for adaptation. So we like to leave a little bit of room to adapt to that. And we also wanted to mention that specific examples of potential projects will be included under select actions in the adaptation plan that we'll be developing in the next phase of the project. So aside from the revisions made to address the comments from the public meeting, you probably noticed that we also added timeframe, potential lead, and estimated costs to the adaptation strategy. Timeframe indicates the timing of implementation. So near term is for 1 to 2 year implementation, midterm is 3 to 5 years, and long-term is 5 to 10 years. We also included ongoing to indicate actions that require some sort of ongoing monitoring or work to achieve the action. Potential lead indicates which departments will be taking the lead in coordinating or implementing the action. And of course, each action will be supported by a variety of city departments, and some will be heavily supported by community groups and organizations. But each action maintains a city lead to ensure that the action is implemented throughout the process. The cost column shows estimated costs. So low cost is under 50,000, medium is between 50,000 and 100,000, and high costs are over 100,000. These estimates will inform the implementation phase of the adaptation strategy and help to prioritize actions under the different goals. And I want to make a quick note here that since the November public workshop, the adaptation strategy has been reviewed by Public Works, Community Planning and Building, and the Police Department. So they've all seen the strategy as you see it, with the time frame, potential lead, and costs included. So the next steps of the adaptation strategy development are to prepare the adaptation report, which will support the strategy that you all see today. And we'll be working on this through February. The next step will be to share the report with the Climate Committee in March. And then lastly, present the adaptation report to commissions and City Council for feedback and approval in April and May. is all I have for you today, so I can open it up for questions and discussion.
Thank you very much. When you look at the adaptation strategy spreadsheet here, there's a lot more to it than what you just said.
Yes, yeah.
So if people have questions, now's the time, as they say. Anybody? Let me see if I can see if anybody's hands up.
Mila, do you want to stop sharing so we can see everybody?
Yeah,
Awesome, thank
sorry
you.
about that.
No worries.
So Kira has her hand up. So please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for presenting. I'm just curious, if we want to read this report, where will it be published for the public to view? And if so, where?
I can take that. We actually have a webpage for our climate committee. If you go to our city website, and then just put in the search bar, just put climate, you'll get to the climate committee webpage. All of the documentation from all of our meetings is included in there. So the adaptation strategies table is actually in the agenda for this meeting. And I have uploaded it on that page as well as on our meetings. It's a standard on our meetings page, but it's also on our climate page.
Thank you.
And when the final report is completed, it will also be on that climate page.
Perfect. Thank you.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
I don't know how to do the raise my hand thing.
That's okay. I can see you.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm just really impressed with this report. I just want you to know that I viewed it with a lot of kind of good feelings about what we're doing and how Rincon has put the whole thought process together and reflected it in the writing. And the thing that I probably was most pleased about was the concreteness with which the suggestions from the November workshop were addressed. I think that it's easy for citizens in any community to feel like, yeah, you wanted to hear from me, but then nothing ever came from it. And so on that score, I feel really pleased and very happy with the work.
Very good point, Lynette.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's really, you can see, I think everything is coalescing here. So it's a good feeling. John, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. And I agree. I think this is extremely well done. And thank you so much for your input today. Could you pull up item 1.1.3 again on your screen? I don't know if that's possible, but I'm just a little concerned with the wording in that. I know my concern is that the WUI guidelines, where the statement that we would basically update the planning and design codes to reflect the WUI guidelines for the entire city versus just the very high fire danger area. The guidelines, you know, we built a house here 18 years ago. They've evolved quite a bit since then. And they've been evolving to try to maintain the character of the city and at the same time to meet changing codes and meet, for instance, double glazing versus single glazing, which double glazing wasn't allowed 18 years ago because it didn't look like the character that was desired at the time. The WUI guidelines, 95% of them could be easily adapted, but there are several of them that are fairly inconsistent with what the design guidelines have been established to maintain character. And it discourages a lot of, say, wood material on the exterior of the building. There are alternates, but there's certain aspects to the WUI guidelines that I think would be really incompatible with how the design guidelines have evolved. So I think it's a little dangerous to just say we automatically just do that for the entire city. I think that it requires a lot of study and feedback from other people in the community to make some value judgments about what parts of WUI guidelines need to be citywide and which ones are only, say, don't make a lot of sense if you're 4 blocks from the ocean, etc. So if there's any way to wordsmith that so that it doesn't say that we're going to take the WUI guidelines and apply them 100% to the entire city, I think we should do that.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can do. And of course, we'll discuss with Agnes as well. But it could be, more strict to fully follow the WUI guidelines in the very high fire hazard severity zone, and as feasible, and take into account the design guidelines apply outside of that area. So we're not fully closing.
Or encourage them or incentivize them, something like that.
Yeah,
just,
if I can make a comment on this, a couple of years ago at the beginning, I think this was when I was first elected, and Carrie might remember, this issue came up before the council, and the council made the decision, right or wrong, not taking a position here, to apply those WUI guidelines to the entire city. So the decision was made, John, and I'm not suggesting that we don't go back and look at it, but I think that we made it. I think that the council actually made that decision, and maybe it's worth revisiting whether that decision was a good decision or a bad decision. The residential design guidelines are sort of, that project is in the process of sort of being resurrected. And I think that would be the right time to sort of get community input on that issue again. So what I would ask is that we sort of, maybe Camilla, you could sort of muddle the language a little bit in sort of the direction that John is asking, but point out that we'll just revisit that decision to evaluate whether it was a good decision or not. And then I would ask Agnes, perhaps you could tell Brandon that this issue has come up and that John raised this issue and sort of we had this discussion, so that when the residential design lines come up for review, which is going to happen pretty soon here, that we sort of have this discussion and we can decide before we produce a new version of the design guidelines, what exactly we're going to do about this particular issue.
Yeah,
Is that...
I'm actually going to put that on Evan's task list to make sure that.
Oh, right. I should have. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm so used to talking more to Agnes, Evan. I should have put this on Evan's plate, not Agnes's plate. I'm sorry about that.
No problem. I made the note already.
And Evan, can you speak to this a little more or not?
Not any more than what Jeff mentioned.
Okay.
Our practice has been to allow for these alternative fireproofing materials anywhere in the city, such as metal roofs, composite siding in place of wood. There is currently a conflict in the design guidelines. And again, like Jeff said, it's something that we are working on in the very near future.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the right vehicle to address this, is what you're suggesting, Jeff. And I know that effort was suspended. And there's a number of other things that are going to be related to what we're doing that are also could be addressed in that exercise. There are things, about electrification, for instance, or codes, the 2023 or 2022 codes coming up and things like that could all be addressed in that exercise.
Oh.
Hi, this is Sayeli with Century Alarm Systems. I'm calling in regards to the city of Carmen's man.
And then, I'm sorry, John, are you finished?
You're muted, John. There you go.
Yeah, I think I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay. So I had a couple of, one sort of equivalent comment sort of to John. I was going to ask sort of the same thing, Agnes. I know that we're doing contract revisions with Monterey Fire for the next however long, and there are a fair number of things in this document that sort of would come under sort of the umbrella of that contract and affect our relationship with Monterey Fire. So I know that we haven't produced a report yet, and this is a little bit of sort of jumping the gun here since we haven't done that. But it might be worthwhile to, and I know Bob's on the call because we just heard him, make sure that Bob and the Director of Public Safety are aware of sort of the things in this document so that we can just sort of try to get most of these things taken care of. It's happening right now, as far as I know. So it's sort of in negotiation, I think. So we could sort of figure out what we need to do and get that stuff done so we don't have to go back and deal with the contract again later. So that was my first thing.
Chip's talking with Monterey Fire and working on those negotiations. So it's important for you and I to communicate that this is the direction we're going as part of the Climate Change Committee. I agree. What else?
I did share the table with Brian Euler. So he has looked at it. Police chief has looked at it. But yes, I think those are really good comments.
And then my other comment.
You're muted.
Sorry. My other comment was a more general one. I was looking at, so thank you, Camilla, for the report. The addition of the pricing stuff is particularly informative, and that's the nature of this comment. The comments, the prices on the sort of natural environment things all seem really low to me. And let me find it here. They were all listed as sort of $2 sign items, and it seemed, here we are, natural environment, increase the resilience of the Mission Trail Nature Preserve. It was listed sort of as a $2 item, $2 sign item, which I think means under $100,000, right? And that seems like that seems like an enormous project to me. There are millions of dollars of projects allocated, that are sort of always being talked about with the Mission Trail Nature Preserve. And then the next thing down was increased resilience to stronger storms. And, we're upgrading the storm drain system to do this. And that's a $10 million project. So that's obviously not a $2 sign item either. And so I would just ask you to sort of hold Bob's, take this dollar sign table back to staff and hold Bob's feet to the fire to make sure that these numbers are right so that we're accurate when we produce this report. And people don't come back later and say, oh, but you said it was going to cost $50,000 and instead it's $500,000. So we can make sort of accurate decisions over the course of the next years. So that would be my ask. The numbers are what the numbers are. We just need to reflect them accurately. So that would be my ask for that. But the report is really great. So thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to respond to that, but was someone else responding to that?
Bob, did you want to say something?
Yeah, if I may, regarding the dollar signs, it's my understanding that that's really focused on the projects to adapt to climate change, not necessarily to fix up all the infrastructure. So Councilman Barron is correct that there's a lot of projects in Mission Trail Nature Preserve, but only a smaller percentage of those projects pertain to climate change. Same thing with the storm drain system. So if we're talking about redoing the entire storm drain system, it's going to be a whole lot more than $10 million. But upgrading certain elements like the trunk line system would be a lot less, and that would get the biggest bang for our buck if we upsize certain parts of the storm drain system to adapt to climate change. So it's not.
That's a great point. Thank you so much for making that. And then I would modify my request then. So where we have active projects going on, maybe in this report, Bob, you could, or Agnes or Bob or staff could sort of differentiate what the dollar signs mean, what the other projects that we know about are that are already going on, and that this doesn't include, the $10 million that we're already slated to spend on the storm drain system. Because you're right, I don't want to spend climate change money on the storm drain system if we're already going to do that stuff. I would rather spend it on the beach, stuff like that.
I'll be happy to spend it either way.
Yeah, so thank you.
That's great. My only other comment on that was going to be, for example, I think 2.1.3, which is increased resilience of the Mission Trail Nature Preserve. The action itself is to update the master plan. So I think that cost of $2 signs is really to update the plan, not necessarily implement the plan. But I think, your point is well taken, and that's something that should be made clear, because it could be misleading if, we're saying something's going to be less than 100,000. And
yes, thank you.
Yeah, it could be a little scary. All right. Anybody else? Oh, yes, Laura, go ahead.
Thank you. A great presentation. Really.
Can you, we're having a hard time hearing you. Can you speak up?
Oh, yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Great presentation. Fantastic work. I am curious about something. I noticed there was some information, some input from Michael DeLappa from last time's agenda, the public outreach meeting of agenda. And two of the three things that he suggested that get looked at and folded into our adaptation strategy have been folded into the revised adaptation strategy, but one of the things has not, unless I'm just missing it. And it's regarding land use policies that support infill, upzoning, and mixed use to facilitate walking, biking, and public transportation. And it's funny because I feel like that would be very much in keeping with one of the comments that Michael gave. Michael said during his presentation about the projected growth, I believe it was, in regards to homes was 5 in the next 10 years, which is interesting, especially because we all see so much construction going on. So I'm just curious about that getting some airtime in the revised potential adaptation strategies.
Yeah. Agnes, do you want to touch on this first, and I can?
Sure. I'm thinking about the action itself, that it might actually fit better under a climate action strategy than a climate adaptation strategy. It's more of a greenhouse gas reduction measure than an adaptation to climate change, a sort of measure. So just to sort of clarify, we do have two parallel pathways here where Camilla with Rincon has been focusing more on the adaptation strategies, while Michael has been focusing more on our action strategies. So when we review the strategies at the next meeting, hopefully the action strategies at the next meeting, then this is where that would fit under.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's see what else. So obviously we're moving along and making great progress. Both reports, this report is great, along with the one we just saw from Michael. So I know we've been at this a while. It's nice to finally see things come together. So thanks to the consultants for doing that and helping us out, right, Agnes? So any other questions? I don't see anything. Anybody's hands. So
yeah, I would just like to say again to both to Michael and Camilla, thank you so much. The efforts are great. It's nice to see all this stuff that we've been talking about for so long, interrupted by this pandemic, to be on paper and in concrete form that we can look at. So thank you so much for this effort.
yeah, and we're definitely looking forward to the updates coming in February and March. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be here and discuss this with you all.
Excellent.
Yes, you're a great team. Thanks.
And of course, being in Carmel, we're quite an engaged group. So hopefully that's well received from the consultants, as they say.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're going to discuss an update on community outreach next steps. Obviously, having and seeing these reports, we're getting to the point where we're going to have to finalize the reports and then get more public input. And as John mentioned, I think there's some sectors that are really going to be taking a look at our recommendations, and we're going to get some feedback, probably some positive and some maybe resistance. So we need to kind of take a look at the outreach next steps. Agnes, do you want to kind of take over on this one?
Sure. So we've done quite a bit of outreach. So as we mentioned in the last couple of presentations, we're looking at having reports more or less finalized in March and possibly ready for presentations at commissions and council in April, May timeframe. So the questions that are here with us today is, we're looking at going to Forest and Beach Commission, Planning Commission, and City Council. What additional outreach should we be focusing on? Or does the committee feel we should be doing to feel like the public is aware that this is happening and has vetted and feels, heard in our efforts? I feel like we've really tried all along to hear people out, but I think obviously people tend to be more engaged once they see something. So we may get more engagement once we have these documents.
Yeah, when there's something to react to, I think that's right. I know when I spoke to Visit Carmel, they really appreciated kind of the forward-thinking approach to our group. And the things that Michael spoke about in terms of carbon offsets and a green visitor program were quite, the group from Visit Carmel was quite enthusiastic about those things. From my standpoint, there will be some sectors that will embrace this quite a bit. And because of our natural environment here, we want to be thought of as a green city. So I think that this really perpetuates that. So it's a matter of who else, from my standpoint, reaching out to Visit Carmel and the chamber is going to be two groups we definitely want to reach out to. I think getting participation, to Lynette's point, of some surveys that can take place, I think, from the chamber for the businesses. It could also be part of our business license renewal program, where we could stick in a survey there. And it could also be maybe part of the building permit process if you're going to get at some of the construction questions and issues. So that's what I thought about there. So what else, Jeff?
I think that's one. I think that the hospitality industry is a big part of that, especially when it comes to the greenhouse gas work. Mm-hmm. I'm surprised and not surprised by the amount of that level 3 stuff. And I think that that's something that we should try to do, figure out how to do it. That'll of course probably be up to the council eventually to sort of rein that in. But I think we should, the council, as a council member, we should try to figure out how to do that with the support of the hospitality industry and sort of start working that. Yeah, I think that's just really important. And then the other thing I see as being a real issue is the sort of construction industry with respect to all the stuff that's going to happen, all this stuff that's going to happen on both sides, both the action side where we have where we limit the amount of natural gas in use and deal with the effects of concrete and stuff like that. as well as the adaptation side, as John spoke of, where we talk about the movie guidelines and, you know, construction trucks coming in. There's a whole bunch of things. And so I think we really need to, I think that's probably I think that the construction industry is probably a little more staid than the hospitality industry, and we'll have a more difficult time with that. And I don't know, I would kind of look to John and Michael to sort of lead that. I would hope that John and Michael would be able to lead that effort, but I don't know off the top of my head. Maybe we should have a different, smaller group meeting to try and figure out what to do with that. You know, we have a couple of months to roll this out, you know, sometime in March or April or May, to sort of roll this out and get feedback. And I think we should really be on that ball. And then the citizenry, of course, you know, talking to CRA like we've done in the past, will be important, and we could certainly reach out from there. The construction industry to me is the most worrisome one, but
it's the Pandora's
I agree,
box.
Jeff. I think it's a tough one, as you mentioned, from both sides of the issue. The thing that occurred to me is I love the idea of the Green Visitor Program. I think that's great. I'm just wondering if there's any way that we could have the equivalent of a Green Citizen Program, because it seems to me that much of our work, if you will, is to people who are here and gone, and that we might be well served to look at ways that we could engage our resident population in becoming, you know, I don't know what it means to be a green citizen. We would have to identify and define that, but maybe there are steps, and people are certified, or, you know, they get a sticker on an electric vehicle that lives in town, something that says, I'm a green citizen of Carmel-by-the-Sea, that, you know, just might be a little added. We're talking about incentives for so many other things. I feel like it might be good to create some kind of an incentive program and a recognition program for local residents.
I think that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
And there was that presentation that we got from Kirsten Liskey for a regional effort that is basically what you're talking about, but on a regional basis. So we're definitely following that project very closely, and I think that would be a good one for incentivizing our residents.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, which Evan mentioned to me in the background, related to the Green Visitor Program, there is a Green Business Program in the county. It has been mostly inactive or not very active due to lack of staffing, but that is something we could roll a Green Visitor Program together with a Green Business Program potentially, and sort of maybe that way not start from scratch, but sort of tailor it a little bit more towards our visitor industry.
I'm making some notes. Yeah, those are could be really positive outcomes from this. So,
John, why don't you and me let me see if I can set up a meeting sometime in the next week or two with you and me and Michael, and we can sort of draft him into that effort, and we can sort of see what we think, and maybe Carrie, you could sort of draft a couple other committee members to sort of work on the business community, sort of down the same path, what we need to do.
Yeah, happy to help with that. Just let me know.
And I know there have been other communities. I don't know that locally there has been anything yet, but I know there are communities not that far from us that have started implementing these requirements for electrification, and so hopefully the building industry is starting to get used to the idea.
Yeah, it's not new. Let's put it that way.
Right.
It's not a new topic. It's just a matter of increasing the awareness. Mm-hmm. All right. So try to get, Lynette, do you want to help me with the business part of things?
Absolutely, whatever I can do.
Okay.
I don't want us to lose, I know we're talking about visitors and business, but I don't want us to lose sight of the citizenry, the resident part of this as well. And I don't know if that belongs in the same package, Carrie, or if it's a separate thing. But I'd be delighted to help, of course.
Okay. All right. And Scott, do you think you'd be more on the construction or the business or the resident end? What do you think? You're muted. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I fit better in one or the other. I'm happy to help out on either if there's a preference there. I'm the one that sounds like it's going to take considerable effort, seems at the building side, but that's just how I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I think you're right. So, okay. Anything else, Jeff? What do you think? Or Agnes or Evan? Are we missing anything here? John? Okay. Okay, so.
Yeah, let's just put this on the agenda next week. And so maybe all these groups can report back next month, and we can all report back to the group about our conversations.
All right. All right. Well, we went through this agenda considering how what reports and presentations we had. We went through it quite well. So maybe we can get done early. What do you think? We've spent some overtime on several meetings, so I think getting done early is a good thing. But thank you for the presenters for being so well organized and helping us get through this. And thanks everybody for your cooperation and being here today and helping us continue the process. So thanks, Agnes. Thanks, Evan, for helping us move forward as well and keep on our timeline. That's really important. So thank you, everybody. And I think we will adjourn then, if there's nothing else. I think I covered the agenda, so we're ready to adjourn. Enjoy the rest of the day and evening, and we'll see you next month, which is, make sure I have the right date, hold on, February 17th, correct? Okay, so don't miss out and put that on your calendar, all right? Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.